Hey, everybody. Welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Don Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are knee deep in a month dedicated to this theme of crossover technologies. And what we're talking about there is dual use technologies that are thriving both on the military side and on the commercial side. This month is sponsored by Kongsberg's Geospatial, so we thank them. And today we have an incredible company called Velos Rotors and their Director of Operations and Training, Taylor Abington, with us. So welcome to the show, Taylor.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Y'all, it's great to have you. And what I want to do, because a picture paints 1,000 words, I want to roll this video right up front. So let's go.
Are you ready to elevate your surveying game to new heights? The Velos V3 is a game changer for surveying professionals. Built with cutting-edge technology, the Velos V3 is the pinnacle of precision and reliability. With payloads up to 10 kilograms and flight times up to 80 minutes, it works as hard as you do. With user-friendly planning software like Mission Planner or UGCS, turning data into insights is a breeze. Elevate your surveying to new heights. Contact us today to experience the Velos V3 difference. Velos V3. Precision, performance, perfection.
All right, so cool. So everybody, as you can tell, we're talking about this V3, really unique design, helicopter, a mini helicopter that's remotely operated. And we're going to dive deep into this today. But before we do, Taylor, let's get a little bit about you because you have a really interesting background.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Don. So my name's Taylor Abington. I am a prior Army aviation guy, as they would say, and even more specifically, helicopters. So I started my career in aviation at the age of 17 when I enlisted and became a Cobra helicopter mechanic. Went through the ranks, learned a lot, grew a lot, worked with pretty much every rotorcraft aircraft in the Army inventory. Went to Army flight school and got out of the Army, decided to go civilian, became an airframe and power plant mechanic, got my pilot certification, moved out around the world working with air ambulances, and ended up coming back to Huntsville, Alabama, working with the Armed Scout Helicopter Project Office, where I kind of did a full loop and came back to working with unmanned aircraft. Got into commercial unmanned aircraft about 12 years ago. And over the years, worked for a few different companies doing counter UAS, UAS commercial operations, and DoD operations, as well as government non-DoD. And then came here to Velos Rotors earlier this year, and really have been able to build on all the things that I've learned over the years and experiences that I've had to kind of help Velos go to the next step.
I love that. And by the way, Michael Seal is the CEO of Velos Rotors. I know you guys had a prior relationship, and Michael is former Navy, if I remember correctly. So
Yes.
thank you both for your service. Obviously, here I am, with my shadow box. I was Air Force, so we've got a whole joint thing going on right now. So very cool, very cool. Tell us about the company, though, because this company is actually based in Greece, but has a U.S. presence.
Yes, actually it does, Don. So the company definitely originated in Greece. The CTO and founder of the company started there with actually a hobby helicopter, became very, very popular and grew, got some investors to come in and help grow the company and take it from a hobby aircraft to a pure commercial aircraft. And then over the last couple of years, we've grown to have 2 locations now in the United States, one near Hollywood, Maryland, and then one here in Huntsville, Alabama, which is where I'm located, the production facility is in Xylocastro, Greece, which is where the CTO Eris is located. In Maryland is where the CEO Michael Seal is located. And then here in Huntsville is a training and integration facility.
Okay, awesome. Fun fact, I was actually in Greece this September for 2 weeks with my husband. Just amazing country. And the whole time I was thinking, man, I wish I knew a drone company here. I could have visited. Who knew, right? Now I know, and maybe on the next trip. Um, but what a beautiful country, and a really cool origin story. How these drones started with the hobby crowd, and then people came to the CEO, CTO, and was like, hey, this really could thrive on the commercial market. Let's talk about why, because what we see primarily, on the commercial side, let's focus on that first. We see a lot of quadcopters, we see, a lot of fixed wing, and this is really a mini helicopter. So why this design versus the others?
Sure. So, as a helicopter guy, first off, I'm a little, directionally oriented towards them, but certainly having flown many quadcopters and fixed wing aircraft over the years, the scalability of the helicopter is one item. So as you grow an airplane, you begin to have very different aerodynamic problems. A quadcopter doesn't scale very well for similar reasons. The blades spin at a constant pitch and varying speeds. Where with the helicopter, you've got constant speed but variable pitch, which allows the aircraft to carry a much more significant load. And that lift capability is spread across the entire wing of a helicopter, where it's not with a multi-rotor. So there's some efficiencies that are gained by using a traditional helicopter, and I would say, just as a note, probably a lot of the reason why commercially we haven't seen a lot of helicopters over the years is because of the ease of use of a multi-rotor. However, as technology has changed and increased, and gyros and stability have increased, our company has really keyed in on that and integrated those technologies to help the end user with a stable platform. And at this point, I would say in regards to weather and operations, this aircraft is significantly more stable than a multi-rotor in high winds, crosswinds, and tailwinds.
Well, Maggie Schuster did an amazing job interviewing you last week in Clubhouse, Taylor. And for those that missed it, you can go back and listen to the replay, find Drone Law Connections in Clubhouse, and find those replays. By the way, like every other day, Clubhouse is changing that app. And it took me a minute this morning to re-find it, but it's like actually easier to find now. They're all listed when you go right into the Drone Law Connections Club, and you're right on the top right now. So really awesome. And, Maggie dug really deep into some of these features you just mentioned. So I want to repeat some of it because not everybody got the opportunity to talk about it. And I think this is to hear it. And I think this is really what sets you guys apart in some respects. So let's talk first about the redundancy of the engines, because we hear this a lot on the eVTOL side, right? The electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. They're putting in some cases, like 6 engines. You guys have 2 in this little tiny bird. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our transmission is a patented piece of equipment, and it's something we're very proud of as a company, because what it does is it allows there to be 2 motors of equal size, each independently capable of operating the aircraft at about a 75 to 90% power range. So as the aircraft flies with the dual motor system, they're operating closer to 50% or less. Then they have dual drive, so dual redundant belts that run into the gears to run the main rotor and the tail rotor. So if you lose a motor, very unlikely, but if you did, the aircraft would continue flying virtually unnoticed to the pilot, with the exception of a change of power. The aircraft would continue to fly unaffected completely. And another key piece to that too, that's pretty significant from other technology, is that the aircraft can auto-rotate, which means that the motors can basically decouple and the blades can spin on their own, so that the aircraft could virtually recover if it lost both motors. Again, extremely unlikely, but another safety level that's layered in there.
You are so gracious, because I use the word engine and it's rotors, and because you guys are powered by batteries, not engines. And
Correct.
What I meant was rotors. So thank you for that. And that's exactly what I meant. You knew it. So tell us about the batteries, because you guys have some pretty good air, you can get some pretty good flight time with this aircraft.
Sure. So, anybody that's out there in the industry knows that we've got this, they call it swap. And basically you can use weight or you can have endurance. And as you increase the weight, you reduce endurance. So for our aircraft, we have 3 primary configurations: 2 battery configuration, 4 battery configuration, or 6. As we approach the 6, we get into flight times of about 80 minutes, plus or minus, depending on environmental situations. On the lower end, with 2 batteries, we're still looking at 30 plus minutes. And so we utilize 25,000 milliamp 6S batteries that are high voltage. We've had really great success with those. They're easy to acquire on local markets around the world, which is another really challenging piece for us because, here in the United States, a lot of drone operators can just, boogie down to their local hobby shop and pick up parts and equipment. For us, we're servicing customers that are around the world operating in some very austere conditions. So ensuring that they've got, that we have vendors that can provide those pieces and parts and batteries is significant for us.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're going to get into all those global use cases. I know you guys have such a global presence. But before we do, I want to continue talking a little bit more about the design. And I also want to give a shout out to our super fan, Kay Cruz, who's saying smart design. So thanks, Kay, for jumping in, and totally agree. This is so cool to see this thing in action. And so, all right, we talked about the batteries. We talked about the rotors. Let's talk about the payloads, because if memory serves, you guys have a special track on the bottom of that vehicle that also makes it unique. You can carry some pretty hefty payloads on this thing, plug and play. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our aircraft, again, the way we look at this is that this is kind of like a pickup truck. We want the user to be able to say, this vehicle will carry my payload, whatever it may be, from A to B safely. Because as we all know, the end user is really concerned about the data that's collected or the product that's delivered. So for us, we've got to make it as universal and configurable for our end users as possible, because today they may have a LiDAR, tomorrow they may have a camera, and the next day they may have a cargo box. So we've got a dual payload rail that has various screw-in mounts so that you can have, say, for example, a dovetail mount for a LiDAR, or you may have a fixed stabilized mount for a camera. And that also allows for the customer to adjust for the center of gravity, which is a big concern for a helicopter, but we've got probably the widest CG of any aircraft I've ever worked with, manned or unmanned.
CG meaning?
Center of gravity.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, look, we're both military and we're used to acronyms, but not everybody might know what that meant. So thank you.
Sure. So the CG is important. On a multi-rotor, typically you have one mounting location, and the aircraft will increase the speed of the rotors to hold the aircraft in a stable position. On a helicopter, because you've only got the single rotor, placing that payload forward or aft is pretty critical. The more forward you place it, the more the aircraft wants to lean forward. So the way we've designed this is that it's got a very, very, very large center of gravity range, allowing the operator to mount a very heavy payload up to 12 kilograms, which is 25 pounds or more, in American on the aircraft. That's very significant for a Group 2 aircraft, that half of the weight of the entire aircraft is payload.
That is significant. I mean, a lot of people are carrying around maybe 5-pounders, and some of those pictures we just saw, we're talking about Regal LiDARs, we're talking about Yellow Scan. I mean, these are not necessarily cheap pieces of equipment. And so when you think about attaching something like this, that bird has to be stable and, secure and safe to do those kind of operations with that kind of payload, right? And speaking of payloads, you guys have carried some precious cargo. So I want to pivot for a second. We go back, some of the design features. If I missed anything you wanted to highlight, Taylor, but I want to talk about some of these use cases and get into this now, because we saw the medical box with the white, the cross on there. And that is a use case that you all have prevailed in. So can you explain a little bit more some of the medical deliveries that you've been a party to?
Sure. So, so I'll say two things about that right off the bat. There's obviously a lot of sensitivity associated with the transport of medical equipment,
Yes.
and the end users have worked very closely with the FAA and those medical facilities to ensure that they're meeting the regulatory requirements. Um, in the past, we've had end users that we have, or we like to call them partners, industry partners that have transported critical medical equipment, if you will, organs, etc., from hospital to hospital to prove that an unmanned aircraft can do it safely and effectively. Um, you know, traditionally that's done with a manned helicopter, and honestly, I come from that background, air ambulances, and so it's exceptionally expensive. You've got multiple humans on board. Where when you have an unmanned aircraft like this that can fly in a similar manner and in many cases faster because it doesn't have to climb to the same altitudes to circumnavigate buildings, etc. This is really a better use case ultimately. One of the big concerns is kind of going back to the design of the aircraft is in a multi-rotor or a fixed wing, if you lose a system, what is your redundant backup?
Right.
Well, with our aircraft, you can lose an entire drive system and still maintain flight for that critical payload. And so, because of that, a lot of end users that have exceptionally expensive or high value life type items are very interested in our aircraft because of its redundant capability and its general performance. As a note, one of the things that we've done to ensure stability and smooth flight is we work with a manned helicopter company that does track and balance, so the rotor blades. And we're getting ready to release some really great information about that here at the first of the year. But we've had great success getting our aircraft to very, very, very low, what's called IPS. And that's kind of the measure of which the aircraft vibrates. So all helicopters have a kind of a inherent vibration in them. But the better that you smooth the rotor blades, the less of a vibration you have. So most organizations out there and all multi-rotors for that matter have that inherent hop, if you will. So the aircraft hops through the air.
Right, right.
But because we've taken this extra time and worked with organizations that have very, very, very significant experience on how to track and balance helicopters, it's made a significant difference in the way our aircraft flies and the stability for critical payloads like organs, for example.
Well, speaking of organs, fun fact, everybody. I think many of you follow me and know that I had a PBS special with the Wings Over the Rockies Museum on PBS called Drones and eVTOLs. They're going to change the world. And there was a segment in there about the very first delivery of a human organ. It was very successful. You may recognize that drone in there. It was actually a Velos Rotors drone. And, when I started talking to you, Abington, or Taylor, I was like, wait a minute, I recognize this drone. And I thought it was yours, but until I confirmed with you just before the show, I didn't fully appreciate that was your drone in that segment. So super cool. We will drop that link. There we go. I see it for everybody. If you missed it, go back and check it out. This was the first of its kind. Now, it took a village to make this happen, but someday this is going to be business as usual for us. And I can't wait till this day. And you guys you did it before you've honed basically the hop and on the road with the rotors, and what you're doing now to make it even better, because surely you don't want things like organs being jostled around in flight. But this one, when you watch it, it's just so exciting. You see the doctor open the box and say, this is good, like this is viable, I can use this and it will save a life. So I get chills honestly thinking about that. But Taylor, we're talking about kind of this medical commercial use, but man, you and I both know on the battlefield this is critical, right? So whether it's bringing blood or insulin or something or morphine, to a downed soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. I don't know that Guardians, Space Force are out there on the battlefield, but you know what I'm saying? I think it's still so weird to say that word, isn't it, Taylor? Like, oh, we have Guardians, Guardians of the Galaxy. But are you guys talking to the militaries about this delivery aspect, not just from the medical kind of standpoint, but also logistics, I'd imagine?
Yeah, Don, that's a super good question. And like you said, having been prior military, I immediately see some of those use cases. So we aren't necessarily working directly with the United States military yet. We have interest in that moving forward. We've had discussions with the Greek military. They have significant interest as well for a number of reasons. Obviously, the really big piece about this aircraft is its size to weight capability. So absolutely on a battlefield, what this aircraft can carry compared to its competitors is significant. So one of the things that we are doing that I think will increase the interest from a DoD type perspective is working with industry partners out there that have technology, for example, like GPS denied environment technology. So those are things that we're very interested because our aircraft is very robust. And we recognize that most of this technology has gaps because a lot of the commercial technology hasn't been tested in those battlefield environments. So we'd like to partner with those industries that have that technology and go down the path to prove that this aircraft can carry those payloads and do the mission that's required of them. So that's some things that you'll also be seeing probably at the first of the year. Some more information about some really cool testing that we'll be doing here in the next upcoming weeks.
Amazing. Yeah, I can just imagine all the different use cases. And kind of speaking of that, you do have a lot of global partners. I know the US is a market that you're looking to really break into. But in the meantime, you're out there everywhere else. And I remember you talking with Maggie about, was it Latin America, rainforest, some really interesting things happening down there. So with your V3, so tell us about that.
Sure. So we have specifically one industry partner that works in the carbon capture arena, which, as you guys know, is really also a very new flourishing technology like unmanned aircraft. And so very specifically, they've been in the jungles in South America, conducting aerial missions, capturing LiDAR surveys, and used our aircraft to do that over a number of weeks. And we recently just received a back brief, and they were very excited with the capability and the performance of the aircraft, and said they were able to do things that they've never been able to do before. And that's fantastic for us to hear. But it's also something that's important for us because sometimes our end users go to places that we haven't experienced yet, and we want to know if the aircraft did well or if it needs improvements in areas. And that's something that we're very attentive to as an OEM. If the end users aren't absolutely 100% happy, we need to know why, so that we can adjust and modify to make the aircraft even better for them. But they're one example that's had great success, and we're really excited for them and happy about how well things have worked out for them.
Yeah, you mentioned this. I imagine in something like a rainforest, just the environmental conditions, the weather you're going to experience, all of those things are relevant to you as an OEM of, all right, so man, we succeeded over here. We know we can fly in these extreme, I'd imagine pretty extreme conditions down there. My question, if you're able to share, Taylor, is what kinds of things were they able to do with the V3 that maybe with other drones or other technologies they were not able to do?
Sure. So there's all kinds of things that that a drone can do that unfortunately a manned helicopter, and I would say that this is a direct correlation right now with this particular use case. For example, close proximity to structures, close proximity to ground personnel, close proximity to terrain features. So the aircraft is able to do kind of, I would say, fill in the gap type operations where a manned helicopter can't get into a very treacherous terrain area. Also, the end users are able to put this on a boat, go down river, open up a landing zone for the aircraft to launch and recover from, and deploy the aircraft within a few minutes Once they've got things set up and operations going, they don't have to wait for 30 minutes to 2 hours for a helicopter to come from the local airport. They can start operations as soon as the sun comes up and start executing. So as a result, in most cases, they're able to get a lot more flight time over the course of the day than they are from a manned aircraft.
Yeah, that's significant. And as you were talking, I was thinking to when you were talking earlier about military use cases, I was also thinking, and Navy partners will cringe when I say boat, because yeah, there's some boats, we know they're ships. I was thinking this would be perfect also off the deck of a ship. Something small like this that, even from ship to ship to carry tools or something significant that somebody needs, so you don't have to use either a smaller boat, with a person on board. I don't think we're fully at the autonomous capability yet for that. And then, or a helicopter, as you said. That's probably the normal course of action right now, or the traditional means to get some of those supplies out to a ship that's maybe underway or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Again, that's an incredibly risky mission for a manned aircraft.
Yeah, the weather and the patterns over water.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and the pitch and the roll of the deck of the ship is a very challenging part for a human being to look down out the window and watch the deck as it moves up and down and ensure that they're descending at the right rate. Whereas an unmanned aircraft that's got a lot of AI and camera sensor technology, the aircraft is truly optimized for that environment. And actually, our aircraft has been tested very successfully with an industry partner in the UK to do this sort of work, taking off and landing from moving vessels, with the use case there in mind.
Wow, super cool. I love that. So what other use cases? You guys are in the rainforest, you're in the UK. Obviously, I would think doing some stuff in Greece, considering that's the origin and the main headquarters of the company, and that's where people came to your CTO and said, hey, let's make this, you need to make this into a commercial product. Where else are you guys operating, or with partners, and what other use cases are out there?
Sure. So in Greece, we've done, I guess a lot of people would call ship to shore. We'd call it island to island.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. In Greece, they've used the aircraft to transport medical equipment and light cargo from island to island. We've got end users that are doing very heavy cargo delivery type operations, also sensitive cargo, like you've spoken about earlier with the organs. We've also got customers that are interested in ISR, using a large, very advanced payload camera to do surveillance and reconnaissance. So think border patrol missions, or maybe protective overwatch in a maritime condition where boats are coming in and out of a port. They don't have to have a manned aircraft out there. A ground operator can provide that aerial surveillance. And so those are some really good use cases. We've got some other additional use cases that are high altitude, which I think is really interesting about our aircraft. High altitude operations can be very challenging for most aircraft, especially ones that we would call air breathers. So ones that have a traditional reciprocating engine that uses gas or diesel, or maybe even a turbine engine. Because our aircraft is electric, we don't have all of those same challenges at a high altitude where the air is thin and the density altitude is different. So we've effectively tested this aircraft and flown it with less than a 1% change in performance at a little over 12,500 feet. And that's pretty significant for end users that want to fly places like the Himalayas, to fly from mountaintop to mountaintop to do resupply or medical delivery. So we're seeing more and more interest in those specific areas for high altitude, long endurance operations.
Well, hey, Taylor, I'm in Colorado, and I can tell you right now, there's absolutely a use case here, whether it's the ski resorts or just remote locations, remote towns. We've had drone companies come here. I'm not going to mention names because I think for them it would be embarrassing, honestly, and I don't do that. But they couldn't get their bird off the ground because, the design of the aircraft could not account for the high elevation to get. So really, you know, I never really thought about that, but you guys are conquering mountains now too. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk about the training. I know Maggie got into this a lot with you, and that's obviously part of your duties there at Velos. You know, when I hear about this drone, you know, some of these quadcopters are very easy to fly, right? They almost like some of them honestly fly themselves. If I can fly it, anybody can fly it, right? So it is there special skill? Are there special skills needed or training to fly this particular to fly the V3 at this time, or is it you mentioned AI? Is it automated to the point where it's kind of easy? But you do have to transition because it's really a different kind of mindset to fly a helicopter than it would be a fixed wing or a quad.
Sure, sure. So, you know, my personal background is pretty heavy in training, and so I think we've had some other industry people that have talked about a lack of training in the unmanned arena, coming from manned aviation and very specifically military aviation. Training is just the rock that you build all of your operations on,
Yeah,
and so for the last decade or so, that's really kind of been a mantra for me: training first, training always, right?
yeah,
Because you learn things in the field, you learn things from other operators, and sometimes it's oops, don't do that, and that's okay because then we take it, we write it down, we integrate that into training, and we can say, hey, an end user had this particular situation, and we'd like to talk about it so that you won't have that.
right.
But very specifically, training, you know, will be primarily executed in Huntsville, Alabama, where we have a fantastic building and airspace to fly in, and also at customer sites. We recognize that some customers are so busy that they have difficulty getting across the world to get, you know, training. So we want to make sure that we can train them as quickly and effectively as we are able to. And we also understand that some of them have pretty challenging environments to fly in. And so it makes the most sense to train them in those environments, because if you train in the most perfect conditions on Earth, no wind, sunny day, you sometimes can assume that that's how you fly all the time.
Right.
So we've really focused on training over the last 6 or so months to further develop our capability for our end user. I'd say the biggest thing to talk about is our aircraft is very, I would say, simple to fly. It is a helicopter, but because of how much tuning and engineering work the team in Greece has done, you know, over the last 10 years at various levels, the aircraft is remarkably smooth and stable and very responsive. So it's honestly a pleasure to fly, and I can see why hobby people would want to fly it because it's enjoyable. Um, but helicopters have some really specific aerodynamic tendencies, and we have found over the years that multi-rotor and fixed wing pilots haven't been trained on a lot of those aerodynamic things. Yeah, they took a test to get a certificate, whether it's in Europe or the United States, but maybe they didn't realize that some of those principles really happen to these aircraft. So that's one of the things that we focus on as well, is ensuring that the students understand aerodynamically how these aircraft work and why. And if you have an emergency procedure, how to respond so that you can recover not just the aircraft, but the payload. Because in many cases, these payloads are hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we want
Or
to make sure that our
priceless. Or priceless. I mean, in the case of an organ, or
100%.
even in an emergency situation like an EpiPen or anti-venom, you know, you can't mess that up. Like people will die, right? Or in the
Right.
battlefield. So I love that you're doing this hands-on training. You know, truth be told, I have my Part 107 license, and you know, when you were talking CG, and then I remembered, oh yeah, okay, now I'm getting flashbacks from studying for that. But you know, just studying for that, if you like, look, I'm a trained lawyer, I'm really good at test taking. I only missed one question on that test. It was silly. You know, but
Right.
you really don't want me out there flying. I'll be honest with you. You know, I took it because I wanted to understand what pilots go through and kind of appreciate, you know, the industry that I'm in better. but I never took it to like, hey, I'm going to be out there flying these missions, because I know I'm not very good at it. It bothers me a little bit that we don't in the United States require hands-on training, honestly, as part of that, certification process, because just being able to memorize some answers doesn't mean you are a safe pilot. And so I think what you're doing is so important, and thank you for doing that. Along those lines, obviously training is part of what you offer your customers. Besides that, your Velos Rotors is about more than just the V3. You offer training, but you offer also other things. So let's kind of walk through some of those. That we only have a few minutes left, and I think this is something you want to cover before we kind of end the show. Your background is in maintenance. Is maintenance included in kind of working with Velos, and what else is out there for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the focuses of our company moving forward is really about the end user. And so, what does the end user need? Well, first off, they need support. They need to be able to access an SME that can give them a very clear and concise answer to their question. Whether
Subject
it's something,
matter expert, SME.
yeah,
You and I know that, but non-military
yes,
types may not get that fully. So yeah.
right. So we have, in fact, a director of maintenance that has about 35 years of helicopter maintenance experience
Wow.
and fleet management. And so one of his key missions, if you will, is to take care of those customers when they leave our facility, because it may be a training question they have, it may be a maintenance question, it may be a performance question. And so what he does is he will ensure that the right people within the company uh, provide the correct answer, and whatever that process to correct the issue or to adjust training, or maybe the aircraft needs to come back and be reviewed and modified and upgraded. We want to make sure that they get one contact point, one resulting answer, because then there's no confusion there. Well, I
Yeah.
talked to this guy and I learned this from that person. So making the end use experience simple is really important to us. Identify the aircraft you need, and in the coming months we'll likely have some additional releases about more aircraft potentially. But right now, identifying the capabilities that you need for your mission set, identifying the payload that you need, and if there is any integration there between the payload and the aircraft. Because again, the last thing you want is for a person to get an aircraft and not understand how to put their payload on and use it, because then there's no reason to have an aircraft. So
Yeah.
we want to ensure that we work with the manufacturer of the payload, and we work with the end user to integrate that payload properly, set up the documentation so that they can remove and reinstall that payload, and go be as effective as possible with that kit. So identify the aircraft and the payload, integrate the payload, whether that's in Greece or in the United States, depending on the end user's location. Provide training specific to the end users and their aircraft so that they can effectively and safely utilize the equipment and payload. And then continue to stay with those customers long term and manage the fleet, because we've got customers that fly a lot, and we have customers that fly for very specific use cases and they don't fly often. But we want to make sure that both of those end users are informed about what the potential issues may be that other users have had, or updates in software, or even in some cases we've modified the aircraft and we've rebuilt entire aircraft for customers because we want to make sure they've got the most current capability. So
Wow. That's incredible. And speaking of integrations, command and control obviously is something pretty significant, especially when you're flying beyond visual line of sight. You guys can integrate with LTE and SATCOMs as well.
sure. And so again, that's part of that initial piece. Like, what do you really need your aircraft to do? Are you going to
Right.
fly kind of, as they say, around the patch and just capture images?
Yeah.
Or are you going to do a really long distance critical mission and you need to have a really high end radio? So we are constantly engaging with industry technology partners that have radio technology, whether it's organizations like DTC or Doodle or whoever it may be. We want to know what you've got. Will it integrate on our aircraft? And is that something we can provide to our end users? Again, every use case is a little different. Every payload is a little different, but our truck will get your cargo where it needs to go.
Very cool. Yeah, I was clapping for Doodle. They were on the show, I'm going to say back in May. And I've just been watching what they're doing. It's so cool with the multi-band radio that they have, very unique. So
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that you're collaborating with them. You also have a ballistic parachute. Obviously, you're partnering with some company on that. I don't know if you want to say who that is or not, but you guys are doing so much. And we're almost at time. So I want to make sure I give you the floor, Taylor, to fill in any gaps, what we didn't cover that you want to be sure that people hear before we sign off today. And then, of course, we'll end with how folks can reach you and where they can keep looking to see all these big announcements for 2024.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Don. So I think I would say in the market right now, we are different. And why are we different? Because we can operate at the top end of a Group 2 aircraft and have the performance that you need, which is very unique. Unlike many of the other operators out there that say, hey, we can fly for 60 minutes, then you put a payload on it and now you're flying for 30. Well, we flight tested our aircraft in all of those wild, austere, high altitude, high wind conditions to prove that what we're saying is accurate. And so we really, truly believe in that. And like I said, end user experience is important to us. We want to make sure that people are happy with their aircraft and they say things like, we'll never own another aircraft but a Velos Rotors aircraft. Because truly they don't need to after they get one.
Well, that's pretty great. And before, we talk about how people can reach you and find all these big announcements going forward, do you guys have plans in the US to attend any upcoming shows? Because 2024 is going to be a big year, I think. We've got Exponential, always commercial UAV. Like, what are the ones where people might actually get to meet you in person?
So I would say that right now we haven't got a full out list of where we're going all this next year, but for the most part, anywhere that you see a LiDAR aircraft or LiDAR company, rather, you're probably going to see our aircraft in the booth. We've been around the world the last year, and we've been at all of the major shows from top to bottom, whether it's technology, aircraft, or LiDAR, or geospatial type. But you'll see us at the big shows, and you'll definitely see our aircraft.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Well, I'll be at some of those, I'm sure, and I hope I get to meet you in person. But until that time, how can people reach you?
Sure. So you can reach me through the Velos Rotors website. You can reach me with taylor.abington@velosrotors.com. You can get to me through LinkedIn, and I've got contact information there on LinkedIn. And I'm excited for people to reach out and learn about use cases and how we can work together to make this industry even better.
Well, awesome. And any final remarks before we head on out here today, Taylor?
Thank you for what you're doing, and hopefully people are growing and learning about this industry and how much we can change the world one rotor blade at a time.
I love it. Yes, thank you so much. I love what I do. I get to meet really cool people like you and hear about the amazing technologies you're working with. And man, it's just so amazing. So thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody, reach out to Taylor if you have any questions or you want to partner. And have a wonderful Thanksgiving for those that are here in the United States. In the meantime, everybody, we are out here.